My name is Maggie Harper, and I flew 2,000 miles to attend my parents' 45th wedding anniversary, only to find out my seat at the family table had been given away. My childhood room turned into a nursery, my voice replaced with applause for my brother's pregnant wife. I was packing to leave, heart broken, when my grandfather pulled me aside. "You can't leave yet," he whispered. "Your grandmother left something behind, and it's yours now." What happened next tore apart the lies that held my family together and rebuilt everything I thought I had lost. I hadn't been home in nearly 2 years, not since the last visit ended with my mother reminding me that a woman's greatest legacy is her family, not her career. Still, when the ivory envelope arrived, embossed with gold lettering announcing my parents' 45th wedding anniversary celebration, I stared at it for 10 whole minutes before deciding to RSVP yes. I told myself it was just dinner. I told myself I could survive one weekend in Texas. But deep down, I knew what it really was. A chance to prove once again that I still didn't belong. I'm Maggie Harper. I'm 42 years old, single, child-free by choice, and the Director of Product Innovation at a leading edtech company in Seattle. I own my apartment, have a dog named Theo who thinks he's a cat, and I wake up every day to a job I love. By every measure I care about, I'm successful. But in my family's eyes, I'm the one who never settled down, the one always chasing something else. My brother Mark? He's the golden child. He married Tiffany, polished, poised, and 6 months pregnant. Together, they're the embodiment of everything my parents ever wanted in their children. Spoiler alert, I'm not it. Growing up, I used to believe my parents were simply old-fashioned. My mother, Linda, always hosted the most elegant luncheons and baked perfect lemon bars for church fundraisers. My father, Franklin, ran the family's real estate business with a firm handshake and a firmer belief in legacy. But over the years, I learned old-fashioned was just another word for narrow. Their pride in Mark was loud and constant. Football trophies, business milestones, engagement announcements. Meanwhile, my law school acceptance barely warranted a congratulatory dinner, and my promotion to director didn't even get a phone call. The last time I was home, Tiffany had casually joked, "Maggie, you should freeze your eggs before it's too late. Science is amazing these days." My mom had laughed. I hadn't. I left the next morning, so when the anniversary invite came, I hesitated. Why go back? Why put myself through the same pattern of polite exclusion? But then Grandpa Walter called. "Mags," he said in that gravelly voice I loved, "your grandma would have wanted you there. You can come sit next to an old man and complain about the food." I smiled. Grandpa Walter had always been the exception in our family. He built Harper Group from scratch before retiring and handing it over to Dad and Mark. But where they saw numbers, he saw people. And somehow he always saw me, so I booked the flight. I bought a soft blue dress I knew my mother couldn't critique, nothing too bold, too tight, or too coastal. I even picked up a monogrammed baby blanket for Mark and Tiffany's unborn daughter. I told myself I was doing this for Grandpa, but a small part of me, stupid, hopeful Maggie, wondered if maybe this time would be different. The day I arrived, the Texas heat hit me like a slap. As I stepped onto the familiar stone driveway of my parents' estate, my stomach knotted. The house hadn't changed. Columns tall and white, shutters painted navy, hydrangeas blooming perfectly on cue. Everything looked just as pristine and intimidating as it had when I was a child, sneaking back in past curfew. My mother answered the door with a smile too wide to be sincere. "Maggie, darling, you look mature." Her eyes flicked down to my suitcase, then back up. "Let's get you to your room. Tiffany's resting in the guest suite." My room. It wasn't until we reached the second floor that I realised what she meant. My childhood room, the one with the faded bookshelf and the mural I painted at 15, was gone. In its place, pale pink walls, a crib, a rocking chair. "We turned it into the nursery," my mother said almost cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind. There's a cot in Dad's study you can use." I stared at the crib, the stuffed giraffe, the tiny floral curtains. "Of course," I said quietly. "Wouldn't want to disturb the princess's palace." I set my suitcase down in the corner of the study-turned-guest room beside an old printer and a stack of Harper Group annual reports. The cot was narrow and sunken in the middle, as if it had hosted one too many restless nights. I perched on the edge, brushing invisible lint from my dress, trying not to let the sting settle too deep. It wasn't just a crib, it was a message. Downstairs, laughter floated from the kitchen, the sound of champagne being poured, plates clinking, and Tiffany's high-pitched giggle. I took a deep breath, smoothed my skirt, and headed down to join the celebration I was technically invited to, but emotionally excluded from. When I entered, no one looked up. Tiffany was seated at the head of the kitchen island, glowing in a cream maternity dress that hugged her bump. Mark stood beside her, one arm slung protectively around her shoulder. My father poured wine into Tiffany's glass, non-alcoholic, I presumed, while my mother adjusted the floral centerpiece for the third time. "Oh, Maggie," my mother said, finally noticing me, "you're just in time for the toast." "To what?" I asked, forcing a smile. "To family," Mark said, lifting his glass with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I clinked glasses, the cool stemware like ice in my fingers. Conversation resumed quickly, weaving around me like I wasn't there. They talked about Tiffany's OB-GYN, her birthing plan, the stroller that had a Bluetooth speaker. My suggestion of a non-profit in Seattle that donates eco-friendly baby gear was met with polite nods and quick subject changes. "I thought it might be nice to do the nursery in soft peach tones," Tiffany said, smiling. "We wanted it to feel feminine, but timeless." My mother beamed. "It's going to be perfect. You'll be such a wonderful mother." "She already is," Mark said. And me, I was the aunt who didn't exist. I excused myself to the hallway, pretending to check my phone, but really just needing to breathe. I wandered toward the dining room, drawn by instinct more than intention. The space was already set for the anniversary dinner. Crystal glasses aligned, name cards perfectly placed. I found mine at the far end of the table, near the swinging door to the kitchen. That's when I heard them, my parents. Their voices floated from the living room, just beyond the arched doorway. We always said this house should stay in the family," my mother was saying. "Mark and Tiffany are the future. It only makes sense." "I agree," my father replied. "Maggie's made her life elsewhere. Seattle, that job, all that progressive nonsense. She won't come back. She doesn't need this house." I froze, heart hammering. "We could help them transition in," my mother continued, "once the baby's born, maybe by Christmas." "And Walter?" my dad asked. "We'll find a place for him," she said casually. "Assisted living, maybe. He's getting older." I backed away before I could hear more. My throat tightened. The hallway blurred, so that was it. They had already rewritten the family narrative. Maggie, the career woman, the outlier, would be erased. And in her place, Tiffany would ascend. I wasn't just being replaced at the table. I was being removed from the legacy entirely. I didn't know what stung more, the assumption that I didn't belong, or the fact that they weren't even hiding it anymore. By 6 o'clock, the house had transformed into a southern gala. Candles flickering in crystal holders, soft jazz humming from the speakers, and guests swirling about in linen and pearls. My mother had outdone herself, as usual. I stood near the entryway, clutching a glass of wine that I hadn't yet touched, trying to remind myself that this wasn't about me. It was their anniversary. I was just here. "You look nice," said Grandpa Walter, appearing beside me like a lighthouse in a fog. "Thanks," I said, genuinely smiling for the first time all evening. "So do you." He wore a navy suit, slightly rumpled but dignified, and a bolo tie that my grandmother used to tease him about. He looped his arm around mine and leaned in. "Remember, breathe. You're not the outsider. You're just ahead of your time." I laughed quietly. "That's what you always say." "And I'm always right." We walked toward the dining room together. The table was already filling up. I scanned for my place card, but before I could find it, my mother appeared with a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, Maggie dear," she said, adjusting a fork that didn't need adjusting. "I had to move your seat just slightly." She gestured toward the far end, near the coat closet. "I thought Tiffany might need the extra space beside Franklin. You understand, with the baby and all." I looked toward the seat I usually occupied, 2 spots from Dad next to Grandpa. Tiffany was already lowering herself into it, her hand cradling her bump like a trophy. "Of course," I murmured, taking the seat assigned to me. From here, the centerpiece blocked my view of most of the table. Walter glanced at me apologetically. I shook my head. "Not here. Not now." Dinner began with the usual speeches, my father toasting the love of my life, Linda, who smiled like a woman who'd trained for this moment all her life. Then came Mark. He stood, glass raised, charming and confident. "I just want to say how grateful I am for the example you both set. Your marriage taught me what commitment looks like, something Tiffany and I aspire to every day." Tiffany squeezed his hand and beamed. My mother wiped away a tear. Mark continued, "We're about to start our own chapter, our own family, and it means the world to us to have such strong roots to grow from." I waited, just a name, a mention, but nothing. I wasn't even a footnote in his speech. "Here's to Mom and Dad, and to the future." Everyone clapped. I clinked my glass against Grandpa's without looking up. My silence didn't go unnoticed. Tiffany stood next. "Actually," she said with a practiced coyness, "since we're talking about the future, we wanted to share something." Gasps and "oh my" whispers fluttered across the table. "It's a girl," she said, her voice trembling with rehearsed joy. "We just found out yesterday." The room erupted. Cheers, claps. Someone even shouted, "Another little Linda in the making." I smiled reflexively, the way you do when someone shows you a baby photo of their dog's Halloween costume. My mother reached for Tiffany's hand. "A granddaughter," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're so blessed." No one looked at me, not to see if I had something to say, not to include me in the moment. I could have stood on the table and recited the Constitution. No one would have noticed. Grandpa nudged me gently. "Want to bet $10 they name her Evelyn?" I gave a small real laugh. "Only if they spell it wrong." He chuckled and passed me a roll from the basket. "Here, eat something. They're going to need you awake for what's coming." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, eyes forward. "Just don't leave early, all right?" I didn't get the chance to ask more. Dessert arrived. Vanilla almond cake with raspberry filling. My mother's favourite. The conversations stayed centred around baby names, nursery themes, and how lucky Mark and Tiffany were to start their family in such a supportive household. I wasn't asked about work or Seattle or my life at all. The message was clear. In this house, at this table, I was not one of them. The moment dessert was cleared, I excused myself as quietly as I could. No one noticed. Not my mother, who was busy gushing over Tiffany's middle name suggestions. Not Mark, who was regaling a cousin with tales of diaper research. Not even my father, who was already deep in conversation about legacy and property values. Only Grandpa Walter's eyes followed me as I walked out. I climbed the stairs quickly, hands trembling slightly, as I pulled my suitcase from the corner of the study. I didn't care about the awkward goodbyes or whether anyone would wonder where I'd gone. I just needed to get out. I needed to reclaim something, dignity, air, control, anything. Outside, the air had cooled slightly, but my chest was tight. I pulled out my phone and ordered a car to the airport. First flight out, red eye, didn't matter. I would sleep it off in Seattle and never come back. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard footsteps. Maggie, I turned, startled. Grandpa Walter stood behind me, leaning on his cane, but faster than I would have expected for someone his age. "You can't leave yet," he said, breath short but eyes sharp. "I have to," I replied. "This was a mistake." He stepped closer. "No, it wasn't." I hesitated, suitcase still gripped in my hand. "They've made it clear. I don't belong here, Grandpa. I'm just tolerated." "That's what they want you to believe," he said, voice low. "But this house, this family, it's not just theirs to define." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He looked up toward the massive front porch. The columns loomed like guardians. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you, but I had to wait. Evelyn made me promise." I stared at him, confused. "Grandma?" He nodded, eyes suddenly distant. Before she passed, she made arrangements, quiet ones, thoughtful ones. She knew how things would unfold. She always saw more than the rest of us. He motioned for me to follow him. "Come with me, just for a few minutes. Then, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you." Against my better judgment, I followed. We walked around the side of the house to the guest cottage, the same one Grandpa had moved into after Evelyn died. It was dimly lit but cosy inside, filled with the scent of pipe tobacco and worn leather. He gestured to an armchair. I sat. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small walnut box. From it, he pulled a folder, a thick one, bound in twine and yellowed with age. "She wrote this over a period of years," he said. "Letters, legal documents, journals, everything." I swallowed. "What is it?" He sat opposite me, face suddenly heavy. "It's about you," my breath caught. "She saw you, Maggie. She saw how you were treated. Not just as a child, but especially after you left. She knew you wouldn't be welcomed back unless someone intervened, unless someone made sure you had a reason to stay." My voice cracked. "But she never said anything. She didn't want to burden you or sway your choices. She wanted you to build your life freely, but she also wanted you to know you were never forgotten." He tapped the folder. "She changed her will, not just the house. There's more." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She left something for you, something she called what's rightfully hers." Her words, not mine. Said, "Maggie will inherit what truly belongs to her, not because of blood, but because of spirit." I didn't know what to say. Grandpa leaned in. "She believed in you, Maggie, more than anyone else. And tonight, well, it's time you saw what she left behind." I stared at the folder. Suddenly, the idea of leaving felt small, petty even. There were answers here, truths I hadn't dared hope for. "And the rest of the family?" I asked. He sighed. They don't know, not yet. She asked me to wait until the time was right. And I think after tonight, it is. A long silence hung between us. Finally, I said, I'll stay. The next morning, the house was still humming from the party, though most of the guests had already left. Dishes clinked faintly in the kitchen as hired staff cleaned up, and distant laughter echoed from the back patio where my mother and Tiffany were admiring nursery catalogues over coffee. I sat on the edge of the armchair in Grandpa Walter's guest cottage, clutching the folder he'd handed me the night before like it contained a detonator, because in a way it did. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Walter nodded, calm and unwavering. "It's time, Mags. Evelyn didn't spend years building this family just to watch it turn into a monarchy where only one line is valued." We walked slowly to the main house, sunlight warming the wraparound porch. My stomach was tight, but my hands were steady. Grandpa pushed open the French doors to the living room and stepped inside with a quiet authority I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was gathered around the fireplace. My father stood with a mug in one hand. Mark was flipping through a Harper Group brochure with Tiffany half draped over his shoulder. And my mother was adjusting a vase that didn't need adjusting. "Maggie," she said, startled to see me, "I thought you were leaving." "She stayed," Grandpa announced simply, drawing all eyes to him, "because there's something everyone needs to hear." The room stilled. "I know this isn't the usual time or place for business," he continued, "but what I have to say can't wait." He walked to the centre of the room and slowly placed the thick folder on the coffee table. "This," he said, resting his hand on the cover, "is Evelyn Harper's amended estate plan. It was finalised in the months before she passed, and as her husband and executor, I was instructed to share it when the time was right." My mother stiffened. "Walter, this feels unnecessary." "Let him speak," I said, voice quiet but firm. He opened the folder, pulled out the top page, a notarized document with Evelyn's signature and a stamped seal, and cleared his throat. As of her final will and testament, dated 3 months before her death, Evelyn Harper left Harper House in its entirety to her granddaughter Margaret Harper. The silence cracked like glass. "What?" my father said, his voice hollow. "She left the house to Maggie?" my mother echoed, blinking as if she misheard. Grandpa nodded. "Not just the house. 20% of Harper Group's private shares were also transferred into a trust under Maggie's name, effective immediately upon Evelyn's passing." Mark stood, visibly rattled. "This doesn't make sense. Why would she—" "Because she believed Maggie was the only one who understood what this place meant," Grandpa said. "Not just the bricks and mortar, but the values this family was built on." Tiffany's mouth opened and closed. "But we were supposed to live here." "She knew that," Grandpa replied gently, "and she also knew that supposed to doesn't mean deserve to." My father stepped forward, red rising in his face. "This is absurd. This house is part of the family trust. My name is still on the deed." Grandpa handed him a copy of the document. "Not anymore." I stood frozen, the weight of the room pressing down on me. I hadn't expected it to feel this heavy, or this final. My mother sat down slowly, stunned. "She didn't tell anyone. Not even me?" "She didn't think you'd understand," Walter said. "She told me once they'll never accept Maggie for who she is unless they're forced to reckon with what she means to this family." Mark turned to me, eyes narrowed. "So what now?" "You'll move in and throw us out?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. This wasn't a power move. I hadn't asked for this. But in this moment, I understood something I never had before. My grandmother hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me a message. You were never less. You were just never allowed to be more. The silence that followed Grandpa's announcement felt deafening, almost physical. I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway, the soft shuffle of a server clearing champagne flutes on the patio, and beneath it all, the slow unravelling of everything my family thought was theirs. My mother was the first to speak, her voice sharp and brittle. "This is insanity." She looked at Walter like he had betrayed her. "You kept this from us? You went along with this scheme?" "It wasn't a scheme," he replied calmly. "It was Evelyn's final wish." "She must have been confused," my father added, flipping through the documents as if he could erase her signature with disbelief. "This isn't what she would have wanted." Walter met his gaze squarely. "It's exactly what she wanted. She made me swear I wouldn't reveal it until the family had shown its true colours." Mark stood with a forced laugh, cheeks flushed crimson. "Okay, so what now? Maggie gets the house, the shares, and we all just clap?" Tiffany's smile was a few seconds too slow. "This must be a misunderstanding," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "I mean, Maggie hasn't lived here in years. You've got your life, your job. This isn't even your world anymore." Her eyes flicked to me, and for the first time I saw it clearly. Not charm, not confusion, but calculation. Tiffany hadn't just married into this family. She'd planned her role, claimed her throne, and now someone had pulled the rug out from under her stilettos. I turned to Grandpa, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why me?" He smiled softly, something paternal and proud flickering in his eyes. "Because Evelyn saw you, Maggie, the real you. She read every article you published, watched interviews you gave about education access and sustainability. She kept a drawer full of your holiday cards, even the ones you only signed M." I felt my throat tighten. "She always said you reminded her of herself," he continued. "Not the version people saw, the real version." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Grandpa sat down heavily, hands folded over his cane. "When Evelyn was young, she wasn't accepted either. Her parents disapproved of her college dreams, thought she was too opinionated. She married into this family thinking she'd earn their respect, but they treated her like a decorative wife. Quiet, polished, background." My eyes widened. "I never knew that. No one did say it's Keats." "She kept it buried, but she never forgot it, and when she saw how you were treated, dismissed, belittled, erased, she recognised it." My mother made a sound halfway between a scoff and a protest. "This is ridiculous. Evelyn loved this family." "She did," Grandpa agreed, "but not the way you wanted her to. She loved it enough to protect the only part of it she thought still had a chance." Me. The realisation landed in my chest like thunder. She hadn't left me the house out of pity. She'd left it as a statement, a correction, a legacy. Mark's voice broke the moment. "So what? You're just going to move in and take over. Change the locks?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't ask for this." "But you're not turning it down," Tiffany said, her tone flat now. I met her eyes. "Would you?" The room went quiet again. My father handed the papers back to Grandpa with shaking hands. "You should have told us." "You would have tried to stop it," Walter said. "Just like you tried to stop Maggie from being part of this family." Tiffany reached for Mark's arm. "We should call a lawyer." Walter stood, his voice suddenly steel. "You can, but the documents are airtight. Notarized, witnessed, and filed with our firm's legal department. Evelyn made sure of it. I looked around the room, my parents stiff with shock, Mark visibly seething, Tiffany frozen in poised panic, and me, still standing, still present, still whole. For the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath my feet was mine. The silence, once heavy with disbelief, gave way to something sharper, accusation. My mother stood, eyes narrowed, voice trembling with indignation. This must be a mistake. Evelyn wasn't well at the end. She was forgetful, confused. She couldn't have made such a drastic decision in sound mind. Walter didn't flinch. She was sharper than anyone gave her credit for, Linda, including you. She had episodes, my father snapped. She forgot people's names. She repeated herself. She wandered into the garage, thinking it was the pantry. And yet, Walter said coolly, she never once forgot that Maggie sent her a copy of her first published piece, or that she voted absentee in every election since 1972, or that you called her sentimental when she cried at her last Harper Group board meeting. My mother's face darkened. You think this is funny? No, he said. I think it's overdue. Tiffany, still sitting next to Mark, with her hands clasped over her stomach like a shield, leaned forward. This feels calculated, she said. Maggie, you haven't been around in years. You swoop in just in time for this revelation. You expect us to believe you had no idea? I didn't, I said, the words hot in my throat. I had no clue until last night. Oh, please, she scoffed. This isn't about legacy, it's about revenge. You've always resented us for not applauding your every move. Now you want to punish the family. Mark didn't speak, but he didn't stop her either. That silence hit harder than her words. I turned to Walter, shaking my head. They're never going to believe this, he nodded solemnly. Then let Evelyn speak for herself. He reached into the folder once more and pulled out a slim USB drive, small and silver. What's that? My father asked suspiciously. A video, Walter said. Evelyn recorded it the week after her final will was signed. She insisted I keep it sealed until after the paperwork was read. I was hesitant to share it now, but maybe her voice will cut through what mine cannot. He moved to the TV, plugged it in, and turned on the screen. Everyone remained frozen in place. A few seconds of static, and then there she was. Evelyn Harper, regal as ever in a blue blouse and pearl earrings, seated in the armchair I now sat in every time I visited Grandpa. Her posture was impeccable, but her expression was tender, a rare softness in her famously composed face. If you're watching this, she began, her voice measured but clear, then the will has already been read, and I suspect there's been some resistance. I heard my mother scoff, behind me. Evelyn continued. I want to explain why I chose Maggie, not because I owe anyone an explanation, but because I believe in truth. I built this home with Walter, but I built this family with my eyes open. I've seen who you are, I've seen what you value, and I've seen who you've tried to forget. She paused, letting that sink in. Maggie was not the easy choice, she said. She challenges you. She speaks when it's inconvenient. She walks away when she's not respected. That is not rebellion. That is self-worth. And it's something I had to learn far too late. I felt the air in the room shift, like gravity had doubled. I chose her, Evelyn said, because she is intelligent, compassionate, and fiercely independent. She does not need this house to feel important, but she deserves it. Because she's the only one who never demanded it. She lived without the privilege the rest of you were handed, and still rose. She looked directly at the camera. Maggie, I hope you know this is not a burden. It is a key. Use it to open what was always locked to you. And remember, you are not alone. Not anymore. The screen went black. I turned slowly. No one moved. My mother's face was pale, unreadable. My father stared at the carpet. Tiffany's jaw was clenched so tightly I feared she might crack a tooth. And Mark, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Evelyn's last still frame on the screen, like he was seeing her for the first time. Mark's voice broke the silence, low but laced with bitterness. "So what now, Maggie? You kick us out, change the locks, claim the throne and wave from the porch while the rest of us pack?" His words landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch, not because they didn't sting, but because I didn't have an answer, not yet. I began, but it trailed off. What could I say? That I hadn't decided, that I hadn't wanted this, but also couldn't deny it? "I didn't ask for any of this," I said finally. "I didn't even know about it until last night." "Oh, spare me," Tiffany cut in, standing up now. "You may not have known the specifics, but you were always playing the victim card, waiting for the moment to claim you were the martyr." "Well, congrats. You won. Happy now?" "Enough," Walter said firmly, standing to his full height. Everyone turned. His voice dropped to something quieter, but somehow more powerful. "This was never about winning. And if you think Evelyn gave Maggie the house and the shares to spite you, then you've never understood your own mother." Tiffany's mouth opened, but Walter didn't give her the chance. "Mark," he said, turning to my brother, "you ask if she'll kick you out. But let me ask you something. When's the last time you made room for her? When's the last time you treated her like she even belonged in this house?" Mark's jaw tightened. "This isn't about who's nicer. It's about family." "And what is family if not how we treat each other?" Walter asked. No one replied. He turned to me then, placed a hand gently on my shoulder and leaned close. "Power doesn't exist to punish, Maggie. It exists to restore balance. Use it to create something better, not to return fire." I swallowed hard. His words weren't just advice, they were a test. Mark sat back down, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was trying to push the tension out through his skull. "So, was this the plan all along? Grandma's big middle finger to the rest of us?" Walter exhaled, and the energy in the room shifted once more, subtle but distinct. "No," he said softly, "that wasn't the original plan." He turned his gaze slowly to Mark. "Do you want to know the truth?" Mark looked up, guarded. "Try me." Walter nodded toward the coffee table, where the folder still lay open. "Evelyn and I talked years ago about handing the house to you. You were the heir apparent, smart, ambitious, the next in line. We thought it made sense." A pause. "But then I watched you," he said. "I watched the way you started talking about Maggie, the way you laughed when Tiffany mocked her, the way you went silent when she was dismissed, erased, ignored, while you stood there and said nothing." Mark shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "I thought maybe it was just growing pains, that you'd come around, but it got worse. You took your place at the head of the table before it was ever offered to you. And you didn't notice who you were stepping on to get there." I could see it land, slowly, painfully. "And Evelyn," Walter continued, "she noticed everything, especially how her own granddaughter was being treated like a stranger in the house she helped build." Tiffany crossed her arms. "So one mistake." "It wasn't one mistake," Walter snapped, the edge returning to his voice. "It was a pattern, one that couldn't be ignored anymore." I sat frozen. I had never heard Grandpa speak to Mark that way. Mark's face hardened, but beneath the anger, I caught a glimpse of something else. Hurt, shame, maybe even regret. I didn't know, he muttered. I didn't think it mattered. It always matters, Walter said. It matters how we protect each other, how we show up, especially when it's inconvenient. I breathed in deeply, the air feeling strangely lighter, despite the tension still crackling through the room. So much had changed in just 24 hours. And yet, something in me had remained the same. The quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, things could still be put right. I didn't sleep that night, not out of anger, though there had been plenty of that in the air, but out of weight. The kind that settles in your chest and refuses to lift. I lay on the cot in the study, the same place I'd been assigned when I arrived, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked through the quiet hours. Outside, the wind rattled the oak trees. Inside, everything felt still and uncertain. The folder Grandpa had given me sat on the desk beside me, closed but not forgotten. Its contents were still fresh in my mind, especially the video. But it wasn't until almost 4 a.m. that I reached for the last item tucked behind the paperwork. A letter, handwritten, folded once. My name in looping cursive across the front. I opened it slowly, half expecting to feel my grandmother's perfume rise off the page. My dearest Maggie, it began. If you're reading this, then Walter has told you what we planned. I hope you're not too angry. I know you never wanted anything to be handed to you. That's one of the reasons why I chose you. This house has seen joy, yes. But also silence, suppression. People swallowing who they are to keep the peace. You've never done that. Even when it cost you a seat at the table, I'm giving you this home not to tie you down, but to offer you a choice. You can rebuild it, you can erase it, or you can reshape it into something none of us could imagine. But whatever you do, do it without bitterness. Justice is not the same as anger. With all my love, Evelyn. I sat with the letter for a long time, reading the final paragraph over and over again. Justice is not the same as anger. She knew me. She knew the fire I carried, the way I ached to be heard. And she also knew that holding power was only meaningful if it was used with intention, not vengeance. By morning, I had made my decision. I showered, dressed, and walked into the kitchen where the smell of coffee and residual tension hung in the air. My parents were sitting at the table, silent, their movements stiff. Mark was by the window, sipping from a mug. Tiffany was nowhere in sight. I placed the letter on the counter beside the espresso machine and cleared my throat. They all looked up. I'm staying, I said simply. Not just for today, but for the long haul. My mother blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not selling the house. I'm not handing it back. I'm not stepping aside so it can be used properly, I said, quoting her with gentle defiance. My father opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to fight, but I am here to lay out the terms. Because this, I gestured around the house, is no longer the Harper legacy built on nameplates and dinner parties. It's a new chapter. And everyone is going to need to adjust. Mark crossed his arms. So this is your power trip? I looked at him directly. No, this is my boundary. The room went quiet again. I'm keeping the house, I continued, but I'm not kicking anyone out yet. My mother raised an eyebrow. Yet? There are going to be rules, clear ones. She scoffed but didn't speak. Rule 1, Grandpa Walter stays in the guest house until he decides otherwise. No suggestions about assisted living, no quiet conversations about transitions. My father nodded stiffly. Rule 2, respect is mandatory. That includes how we speak to each other, how we speak about each other, and how we treat this house, not as a battlefield, but a neutral ground. Mark looked sceptical. And if we don't follow your rules? Then you're choosing not to be part of this space, I said, and you'll lose access to the house, to the meetings held here, to family decisions. It was blunt, but it needed to be. Rule 3. The shares Evelyn left me, they stay with me. I won't interfere in daily operations of Harper Group unless necessary. But any major real estate move involving this property needs my signature. I let that one hang. My mother finally spoke. This is blackmail. No, I said, this is clarity. Walter, who had been leaning silently against the doorframe, smiled. Sounds like Evelyn made the right call. My voice softened. I'm not here to punish anyone, but I won't be erased again. This house represents more than bricks. It represents a choice. And I'm choosing to redraw the lines. I could see the resistance rising behind my mother's tight-lipped smile, the way her eyes darted toward my father like she was silently daring him to speak up. Mark said nothing, but the line of his jaw had gone rigid. And yet none of them interrupted. For the first time in my life, I had the floor. And they were listening. There's one more rule, I said, voice steady. Rule 4, anyone who violates these boundaries, whether it's through disrespect, manipulation, or undermining the decisions made, will lose access to this house and everything connected to it. I let the word settle. The gravity was intentional. This isn't a threat, I added. It's a consequence, a boundary that finally comes with accountability. My father shifted uncomfortably. You're asking us to walk on eggshells in our own home. No, I said. I'm asking you to walk with respect. For me, for Grandpa, and for the legacy you've all taken for granted. Walter gave a soft grunt of agreement. She's not wrong. My mother opened her mouth to object again, but stopped herself. Maybe it was the quiet authority in Walter's tone. Maybe it was the finality in mine. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the realization that for once she didn't hold the power here. I'll need time to process, she said at last. Take all the time you need, I said, but know this, these aren't negotiable. Mark stared at me for a long moment. You really mean it, don't you? I really do. He nodded almost to himself. Okay. The room deflated slightly, the tension slipping into something quieter. Not peace, but perhaps truce. I felt the first breath of it in my lungs. Walter cleared his throat. Evelyn would be proud. That nearly broke me. I gave him a grateful smile and excused myself, heading out onto the porch. I needed air, sunlight, silence, and maybe a reminder that I could still be myself here in this house despite everything. I wasn't alone for long. From inside the living room, Tiffany stood near the window, half hidden by the drapes. She held her phone tightly, her posture too still. Her fingers moved quickly, eyes darting, lips pursed. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the message send. The chill hit me before the breeze did. She slipped the phone into her pocket and walked toward the kitchen, face composed. A perfect picture of poised acceptance. But I knew better. Back in the study, I opened my laptop and checked my calendar. My return flight was flexible. I'd planned on staying a few days longer to help Grandpa sort through some old files and to revisit the town archives for a side project. But now there was something else buzzing at the back of my mind. A voice I hadn't heard in years. The one that said, "Watch your back." I couldn't be sure what Tiffany had just done, but I knew the look of someone laying groundwork. I'd seen it in boardrooms, in legal negotiations, and in PR firestorms. She wasn't taking this lying down. Later that afternoon, when everyone had retreated to separate corners of the house like bruised boxers, I ran into her in the upstairs hallway. "Maggie," she said, sweet as ever, "I just wanted to say, I hope we can all find a way forward." "That depends," I said, voice even. "Are you walking with respect?" She smiled, too wide, always. She passed me slowly, but I didn't miss the tension in her shoulders. Downstairs, my phone buzzed with an alert. A keyword, ping, on my name, tied to a Harper Group legal database. My heart stuttered. Tiffany had contacted a lawyer, probably to explore how airtight the will was, maybe even to question Evelyn's mental state at the time of the change. She was moving quickly, quietly, like all good strategists do. I leaned against the banister, mind racing. She could try. But if Evelyn taught me anything, it was that power means nothing without purpose and protection. I wasn't going to fight dirty, but I was done playing nice. Let them come. I had boundaries now. I had the house, and I had a grandmother's voice echoing behind every decision I made. 1 month passed. The dust hadn't exactly settled, but it had stopped choking the air. The Harper house, once a stage for silent battles and veiled insults, now moved in quieter rhythms. Strained breakfasts, muted dinners, and long stretches of silence that spoke louder than shouting ever could. I had returned to Seattle after that explosive weekend, needing the cool grey skies and ordered chaos of my city to breathe again. But Texas and everything it represented wasn't finished with me. I flew back twice in 4 weeks. Once for legal logistics regarding the trust, and once just to check on Grandpa. Each visit felt like walking through fog. I was present but never fully welcomed. My room, the guest study, remained untouched. My place at the dinner table was no longer challenged, but neither was it acknowledged. My mother offered tight-lipped civility. My father defaulted to discussing quarterly earnings over asking how I was doing. And Mark, he kept his distance. I tried. I invited him to coffee during my second visit, choosing a spot we both loved as kids, Cafe Mason, with its creaky booths and cinnamon rolls the size of plates. He agreed, then cancelled the morning of with a vague, "Tiff's not feeling great, sorry." No offer to reschedule. No follow-up. When we crossed paths in the house, he nodded, said little. His silence wasn't cold, it was resigned, like he couldn't figure out how to engage without losing something he couldn't name. As for Tiffany, she was nearing her due date, moving through the house like a queen in waiting. Every gesture was deliberate, every smile practiced. We didn't speak directly unless absolutely necessary. Still, I watched her closely, measured her steps, her glances, the hushed calls she took behind closed doors. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in the middle of my third visit, I came downstairs to find the family gathered around the living room in a state of calm chaos. "She's here," my mother said, her voice unusually soft. Tiffany had gone into labour the night before, and instead of going to the hospital where she'd pre-registered, she'd insisted on delivering at a boutique birthing centre in Austin. Because of course she had. By the time I arrived, she'd already delivered. A healthy baby girl. Mark stood near the fireplace, holding the newborn swaddled in a pale lavender blanket, his face a mix of wonder and exhaustion. For a moment, he looked like the little brother I used to carry on my back, the kid who once built blanket forts with me in this very room. I stepped forward slowly. "May I?" He nodded and handed her over. She was perfect. Dark curls, pink cheeks, tiny fists curled like question marks. Her eyes blinked up at me with innocent detachment, no judgment, no legacy, just breath and softness. Tiffany, reclining on the sofa, watched me like a hawk in pearls. I rocked the baby gently. "What's her name?" There was a pause. Tiffany sat up straighter, locking eyes with me before saying clearly and deliberately, "Evelyn Grace Harper." The room held its breath. My heart stopped. Not from offence, but from the sheer audacity of it. I looked at Mark. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Tiffany's expression was calm, but underneath it I saw the message loud and clear. You may have the house, but I will carry the name. I swallowed hard, smiled for the baby, and kissed her forehead. She's beautiful. And she was. Evelyn Grace Harper. Twist or tribute. Reclamation or rebuke. Maybe all of it, maybe none. But what I knew in that moment was this. This child would grow up never knowing the storm her name had stirred. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. That night, the house fell into a heavy hush. The kind that only descends after new life enters the world, and everyone pretends to rest, but no one truly sleeps. I lay awake in the guest cottage, the soft hum of the ceiling fan overhead doing little to calm the buzz in my chest. Outside, cicadas sang in the darkness, their relentless rhythm mirroring my thoughts. Evelyn Grace, the name still echoed. I wasn't angry, not really, just suspended, caught between understanding and unease, between admiration for their boldness and wariness of their intent. Sometime past midnight, I heard a soft knock on the door. I opened it to find Mark standing there, hoodie over pajamas, his hair a mess, face pale under the porch light. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, like someone entering sacred ground, unsure of the welcome. We sat at the small breakfast table near the window. I poured him some leftover tea. He didn't touch it. "I owe you an apology," he said, hands clasped, voice raw. I said nothing, let the silence hold him accountable. "I should have stood up for you, at dinner, at the reading, years before that." His eyes met mine. I didn't, and I hate that. I exhaled slowly. "You didn't just stay silent, Mark. You watched it happen over and over. And when you didn't speak, it gave them permission." "I know," he whispered, "and I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know. It's been tearing me up." I believed him. The tightness in his shoulders, the way he hadn't met my gaze since Evelyn's name was announced. "Why now?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Because tonight I saw my daughter's face, and for a second I thought, what if someone treated her the way we treated you? What if she grew up strong and smart and independent, and instead of celebrating her, we pushed her aside because she didn't fit our mold?" I blinked, surprised by the sincerity, moved, despite myself. "She's named after Grandma," I said. He nodded. "That was Tiffany's idea, a power play. But also, maybe a peace offering. She's layered like that." I smirked slightly. "You think?" He chuckled dryly, then turned serious again. "I found something," he said, "in the files Grandpa gave me to organise." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a thin folder, much smaller than the one Walter had handed me weeks earlier. He pushed it across the table. "What is it?" "Proof," he said. Tiffany accessed and edited the preliminary estate documents before the final version was filed. She deleted a clause that would have notified the family of Evelyn's changes immediately after her death. It's small, buried deep in the legalese, but it's there. I opened the folder, scanning the comparison of two drafts. There it was. A clause flagged with metadata showing two logins. One was Walter's. The other? An IP address linked to Tiffany's laptop. My breath caught. "She tried to delay the storm," I said. He nodded. "She thought if she had more time, she could pressure Grandpa. Or soften the blow. Or reverse it entirely," I added. He didn't deny it. I didn't know, he said. Not until now. And when I saw it, I couldn't keep it from you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. Thank you, I said at last, for telling me. He looked down. It doesn't make up for anything, but maybe it's a start. It is, I said softly. It's something. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Maggie? Yeah? I meant what I said. I want to be a better brother, and if you'll let me, I want Evelyn to know the Harper legacy she inherited isn't broken. Not completely. I smiled, for the first time, not just politely, but with hope. Then let's start rebuilding it. 1 year later, the house looked the same, but it felt entirely different. I still lived in Seattle. That hadn't changed. My work, my life, my independence, they were too deeply rooted to abandon. But now I spent 3 months of the year in Texas, splitting my time between boardrooms and garden beds, between policy briefs and porch swings. I came back for Grandpa Walter mostly, but also for something I hadn't realized I needed. Roots, real ones. Every time I stepped into Harper House now, it welcomed me. The foyer no longer echoed with silence. The dusty portraits that once loomed over guests had been rearranged. In the main hallway, a new photograph had taken its place of honour. One of Evelyn Harper, young and radiant, standing with her arms folded beside a blueprint of the house. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and vision. Below the frame was a bronze plaque I'd commissioned, the house she built, brick by brick and boundary by boundary. The changes weren't just cosmetic. The dusty library off the back parlour had been gutted, cleaned and reborn as a community reading space. We stocked it with donated books, old family volumes and a growing children's corner. Once a month we hosted open reading hours and local history talks. The neighbours came, curious at first, then loyal. The Harper name, once whispered with weight, now invited connection. Walter, of course, became the unofficial librarian. He loved it. He told stories to wide-eyed kids about lumber construction and what it meant to build something that lasted. Every child left with a sticker that said, "Harper houses hold stories." It was cheesy. It was perfect. And Sundays, oh, the Sundays. We revived Sunday dinners, but this time on new terms. No assigned seats, no silent expectations. Just shared dishes, open conversations, and laughter that didn't feel forced. Everyone cooked now. My mother, who once insisted on perfection, now asked for help with dessert. My father made ribs so tender they fell apart if you looked at them too hard. Even Mark, who had burned water in college, learned to make cornbread. And me, I made salad, always salad. They teased me for it. I didn't care. We ate around the big table, the one that had once been a battlefield. Now, it was a round table in spirit, if not shape. Everyone had a place. Everyone had a voice. Including Evelyn Grace. She sat in a high chair between her parents, eyes bright, hair already curling like her namesake's. She babbled constantly, especially when Grandpa Walter told stories. She called me Auntie M and reached for me every time I walked into the room. I never thought I'd love a child that wasn't mine this much. Sometimes, when she fell asleep against my chest during those long, lazy afternoons, I'd whisper things her namesake would have said. You don't need to change to be worthy. Speak up, even when they don't like it. Love without shrinking. I didn't know if the words stuck. But I said them anyway. We had rebuilt something, not the same house, not the same family, but a version that didn't require silence, shame, or smallness. And the miracle wasn't that everyone had changed completely. My mother still dropped passive-aggressive hints. My father still took too much pride in legacy. Tiffany still measured every move like a PR strategy. But the difference was now, I responded, I didn't shrink. And when I spoke, they heard me. Not because I raised my voice, but because I had nothing left to prove. This was my house now. And for the first time in my life, it felt like home. The sun was low over the Harper property, casting long shadows across the front lawn. The cicadas had quieted, replaced by the soft rustle of evening wind. Inside, dinner was done, dishes rinsed, and the laughter of another Sunday gathering lingered like a gentle perfume. Mark found me on the porch swing. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile on his face. He didn't speak right away, just sat beside me, letting the creak of the swing fill the silence. "I did something," he said finally. I raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" He smiled. "No, not unless you're scared of redemption." From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a manila envelope, crisp and sealed. He handed it to me without ceremony. I opened it carefully. Inside were the legal documents transferring his remaining shares in Harper Group to me. Full and final, no conditions. My mouth parted in surprise. "Mark, this is—" "I know," he said, "but it's right." He leaned back, eyes fixed on the horizon. "When Evelyn gave you the house, we all thought it was about bricks and equity, but she wasn't giving you walls, Maggie. She was giving us something we forgot we lost." He looked at me then, steady and soft. "She gave us you back." My throat tightened. I reached for his hand, squeezed it once, and didn't let go. We sat like that for a while, watching the day dim, until Grandpa Walter shuffled out with a small envelope in his hand. "She wanted you to have this," he said, placing it in my lap. "Her last letter. I promised not to give it until you'd truly taken the house as yours." I unfolded the familiar handwriting with reverence. "My Maggie, if this is reaching you, then the house is no longer just mine. It's yours. But you already knew that, didn't you? You've carried weight your whole life that didn't belong to you. Expectations, silence, invisibility. You survived them. But now I want more for you than survival. I want legacy, not the kind made of inheritance or portfolios, but of wisdom, of memory, of voice. Family is not who you're born into, it's who fights beside you, and if they haven't earned their place at your table, you get to decide who sits down. Use what I gave you. Not to hold power, but to share it, teach it, pass it on. You're not the end of my story, you're its continuation. With all my love and 1,000 Sunday dinners to come, Grandma Evelyn. I folded the letter with shaking fingers and placed it back in its envelope. Mark said nothing. He didn't need to. Later that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the study, the same one that once felt like exile, and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I began to write. "Dear Evelyn Grace, one day you'll be old enough to read this. Maybe you'll be sitting right where I am now, wondering what kind of Harper you're supposed to be. Here's what I hope you'll know. You don't have to be perfect to belong. You don't have to be silent to be loved. And you never, ever have to shrink to make others comfortable. This house, this family, this legacy, it's not built on obedience. It's built on truth, on growth, on choosing love over pride. You're named after someone strong. And if you grow into half the fire she carried, you'll light your own path without fear. But just in case, here's a match, just one. Use it to ignite the future, not burn bridges behind you. Love always, Aunt Maggie." I signed it, dated it, sealed it, and placed it in the drawer beneath Evelyn's original letter. A legacy within a legacy. Words to pass on, truth to keep going,